Okay, so thank you everyone again for joining this info session. Um, my name is Amy Stube. I'm from the Office of International Services, and we are celebrating International Education Week. And we have with us today Dr. Claire Openshaw, who is a faculty member in the Addiction Studies Department. And she is originally from South Africa and has spent many years living in Ireland as well. She's now here in the US, and she wanted to share with our students a global perspective of mental wellness amidst the pandemic. And I know there has been a lot of interest in this area from our international students, so we're really excited to hear what you have to share with us today and see where we can take it from here. So thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I know that it's probably another meeting that you're joining online, so um, yeah, thank you. I wanted to kind of start out by acknowledging the land that we're on today. So I'm here in Chicago, and it's located on the traditional unceded homelands of the Council of Three Fires. So that's the Ojibwe, the Odawu, and then the Potawatomi. And then there's also many other tribes that have also called this area home. And I think that it's just important that we acknowledge the land that we are on. So, I am a counselor, and I think that obviously the pandemic has affected so many people in so many different ways, but I think that a lot of us look at wellness and our health in many different ways. And so for us, I think that I kind of wanted to really kind of talk about it from a global perspective, really for a lot of the international community. And a lot of you are coming from different areas. So if you'd be able to kind of just let me know the countries that maybe either you call home or where you come from, or for me, obviously, I was born and raised in South Africa, but I spent a lot of time living in Ireland as well. So if you could write in the chat where you call home, or where you come from, I think that may kind of just be helpful for me and give me a little bit of context with who I have with me here today. Um, so obviously the pandemic has, caused lots of issues have arisen that have really impacted our wellness. So there's panic, anxiety, depression, some trauma, the suspiciousness. There's this aspect also of what's called infodemia. So there's this aspect of too much information, and there's some misinformation that's out there. And then I think it's really important for us to bring up this aspect of xenophobia, which is this prejudice against people from other countries. And then, of course, these civil rights and racism that have been almost these two pandemics that there's so much aspects that have been brought to light in this last year and a half. Obviously, that's gone on much longer than the COVID-19 pandemic, but that's brought on, and really affected a lot of the wellness that's happened in the last, year and a half, coming on 2 years. And so the pandemic has really kind of brought on these public and global mental health crises. But then it's also impacted the way we socialize. And, often there's a lot of communities have an individualistic way of moving through life, but there are so many communities that interact in a very communal way. And we're going to talk about that today. And so, how this has affected people's well being, particularly in a psychosocial way, which is a way of interacting with each other, and how do you remain connected So this term of social distancing, I think, was one of the most harmful things that came out of the pandemic, because it really wasn't social distancing that we were that people were trying to reinforce, but it was this physical distancing. People could still socially connect. You could socially connect over the phone. You could socially connect, doing these virtual meetings. You could still socially connect in many, many different ways, but you needed to have that physical distance. So yeah. I just kind of wanted to highlight that. I know there was a few chats that came in, Amy.
Yes, I just want to let you know we have someone on here from Nigeria, Serbia, and then another individual who was born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago, but has family all over the world. And then I myself had spent many years in Italy.
Amazing. Okay, great. Actually, throughout the PowerPoint, there's a few aspects that I bring up of Nigeria, actually. So please, if there's anything that I've interpreted in, an incorrect way, or that you would want to bring in and enhance, please let me know, because that's how I'm going to better myself, and that's how we're going to, that's how I'm going to learn. So please, if you'd like to share, and then anybody, if you know of anything or can share, please do so throughout the presentation. So the relationship between culture and mental health and wellness is complicated, because we're all going to express our thoughts and our behaviors and our emotions differently. And so the way that systems are set up can sometimes can often discriminate against some people. So I think that this is going to affect how some people engage with systems and ask for help. I wanted to talk about this aspect of how lots of people are now looking at our mental health and our mental wellness as way more important. Often there was this focus on just physical health. And I think that, obviously, being a counselor, a mental health counselor, I think that this is really important. So Dr. Brock Chisholm, who was the first Director General of the World Health Organization, really started emphasizing how this wellness of focusing on mental health. He basically said without mental health, there can be no true physical health. And he started to kind of say, we need to really be focusing on mental health so that we can truly be well. So I kind of just want to point out that often the words health and wellness are used interchangeably, and it's going to look different culturally. And so I want to kind of talk about, that's kind of what we'll be talking about today. But there's different definitions with it. So I wanted to kind of point that out. So health is the state of being, whereas wellness is the state of living in a healthy lifestyle. So well-being is the state of being healthy and happy or successful, and then wellness is a state of quality of being healthy. So your concept of health may be different to somebody else's, and then well-being may consider the entirety of an individual and including someone's body or mind. So I wanted to kind of put something else that the World Health Organization spoke about, and it's looking at these factors. And so there's these protective factors out there. So you could be looking at someone's confidence and their self-esteem, or the way they communicate, or their parenting, the parents, or their family interactions, or their economic security, and things like that. And then there could be these other factors that could impact the way their wellness or their well-being or their health is. So this could be their low self-esteem, or any medical illnesses, any neglect that they may experience, or any low incomes and things like that, work stress. there could be injustices or discriminations. So things like that. I want to even say, for many international students, the struggles of us coming over to a new country and trying to, acclimatize or acculturate to, a different culture, finding out, how we need to figure out a new academic scholastic system and things like that. There's a lot more added stresses of how we need to navigate these things. So when we look at wellness, I've spoken a lot, obviously, about, the mental wellness that, and the physical wellness, but and even kind of some of these social aspects. But for us to really think about us being well-rounded and well, there's lots more that we can focus on. And even thinking of being an international student, there's this intellectual aspect. Lots of us would not only maybe focus on this religious aspect, but if you don't subscribe to any religion, there's still possibly a spiritual aspect, occupational. As international students, we're not able to work. So that is a barrier for, many of us. How are we going to support ourselves? So those type of things may need to be figured out before we come over and things like that. Emotional aspects. So this wellness wheel really looks at all these different areas of wellness and how are we fulfilling these in our lives. And so the hope is that we're engaging in all these different areas of our lives to really lead fulfilling lives. Before we kind of move on to this, I just kind of want to say if anybody has anything to point out or ask or kind of add, please, just speak up. I'm so open to people sharing or asking questions. I wanted to point out this medicine wheel, or it's sometimes known as the sacred hoop. And so this is from Native American tribes, and it really symbolizes health and healing. And what it teaches is this interdependent sections, but it's also showing how interconnected it is. And ultimately, it's showing if we can heal ourselves, then we can heal our families and our communities. And so it's been used by generations, and it embodies these four directions, which means something different for each tribe. But the movement in the medicine wheel is circular, and so it typically goes clockwise. And so it helps to kind of align the forces of nature. And so this one here was kind of adapted by the Red Road 12 Brady, but this one here was adapted for self-care within COVID-19. And so here it was kind of speaking about, physically, how can you look after yourself? Wash your hands, take a relaxing bath or shower, and things like that. And then mentally, how can you look after yourself? And there's aspects of practice mindfulness, consider different viewpoints, learn something new. Emotionally, there's things about, create a gratitude list, watch a funny movie. An area of mine clinically is trauma, and so every time I would teach a trauma class, which is such a heavy class, I would start the class or end the class. Typically start the class by, giving a something with laughter, because maybe in the middle of the class, even just to kind of break up some of that heaviness, you know, and then maybe end the class with some type of mindfulness, because there is so much heaviness, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But then there's a spiritual aspect, and it's, you know, learn more about language and culture, speak with an elder, and that's by phone. Because so now that we're, you know, stepping away from what was a very heavy quarantine time, there may still be some of this anxiety around, you know, uh, what's safe to do and what's not safe to do, right? So for you to kind of see what you feel comfortable doing, and maybe that might depend on, maybe it is, say, you know, a grandmother that you do want to go and visit, or, you know, an elder person that you have made a connection with, that is here, and you don't feel like it may be safe to visit them. You know, maybe that is, you know, by phone or virtually, or whatever the case is. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there, because I thought that was really applicable here. Here's just different meanings of the 4 different directions. Um, and how they can represent different things: stages of life, stages of the year, aspects of the life, elements of nature, animals, and then also ceremonial plants. I talk here about here we talk about traditional healing, and so here there are certain healing plants, and so Native American, Native Alaskan natives, and Native Hawaiian healers have a long history of using indigenous plants, and so medicinal plants and their applications are diverse as the tribes who use them. So there's many benefits in using the different plants. But ultimately, you know, healing communities. Community is an essential aspect of Native conceptions. Wellness of the individual is inseparable from the harmony within the family and the community. And this you will find in many different countries and many different cultures. So an anthropologist proposed a game in Africa, and so this is kind of I suppose, a bit of a philosophy or a story, but, you know, he put a basket full of fruit near a tree, and he told them that whoever got there first would win the fruit. When he told them to go, they all got up and took each other's hands and ran over there together. Then they sat enjoying the fruit. When he asked them why they ran like that, as one could have, you know, had gone and got all the fruits to themselves, they said, how could one of us be happy if all the others are sad? And ultimately, it's this philosophy called Ubuntu. And in the Xhosa culture, which is one of the cultures in South Africa, it's this culture called I am because you are. And ultimately, it's kind of saying, you know, that ultimately, like, how could I go over and get the fruit and be sitting there and eating all these fruit if no one else has this fruit? And so, you know, that would have been a lot about how I would have grown up. And, you know, moving to Ireland, I would definitely have noticed a very similar philosophy. Moving to Chicago, I don't know if I kind of see that as much. I think it's a very different way of living. And that's maybe just, I think, by maybe the people that I may be personally surrounded by, because I know that there's a lot of different communities that would have a different culture. But I think that then that is going to definitely affect how your wellness and how COVID has then affected you. So within COVID, I mean, there's been so many new challenges that have kind of come up. And so, feelings of insecurity, of uncertainty, financial concerns, feelings of isolation, um, having our routines thrown off. Even now, the unpredictability. Of course, now things are kind of starting to come up, but there is still this aspect of what will things look like. So we still kind of are not sure. Even like with my child's daycare, we never quite know if, things are going to come up and the kids are going to be at home or whatever the case is. So I wanted to talk about this aspect of like isolation and burnout. So, um, you know, loneliness is going to heighten these health risks. And so there's very little difference for self-reported loneliness amongst different generations. And why I say this is because I think that there might be this notion that we think, okay, more of the elder population may feel more lonely, but that's not always the case. Um, so a US national survey found that 20,000 adults reported sometimes or always feeling lonely. And then there was some data that found that those between the ages of 16 and 24 were more lonely than older adults. And then it only increased after the ages of 75 due to a loss of spouse. So I think that this is really important for us to kind of know, if we're looking at younger people. There was a study done in England that found that 10% of adolescents and then 3% of older adults reported higher rates of isolation and burnout. And then in New Zealand and Japan and the US, they kind of show the same. So since COVID, there's been this new term that's kind of come up, and I personally think that it's very important that we identify what it is that we're feeling, because I think words put to feelings really helps. So this term called languishing is there's a few kind of ways that we can kind of say it. So it's this state of confused and conflicted emotions because there's so much that's come up during this time. Um, it's also a feel of detached and struggle to kind of find resolve, required to change our circumstances for the better. And I think that it's also because it's kind of gone on for so long. The absence of feeling good about your life. And it's also kind of more of a tendency, uh, and it's more situational versus universal. So it could just be more that maybe something comes up and then it happens. And then it's a predictable outcome of a stressful change brought on by the pandemic or world crisis. And I think that a lot of people are kind of finding this, that it's just this almost ever flowing kind of feeling, and it's hard to kind of define. Some people are kind of not knowing exactly how to describe how they're feeling. And so I kind of just wanted to point that out. Before we move on to this part, did anybody want to point out anything or bring anything up?
I was just going to say regarding the story you told earlier about the I am because you are, um, and that you don't see that as much in the Chicago area. I feel like that's more of the Western way of living, just being more independent and, um, as opposed to the Eastern way where it's just much more communal.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would definitely, know with a lot more of my Latinx friends, they would have a very different way of, you know, um, living. Even with my French or friends, they would be very, very different. Yeah, and they would be similar. I mean, my African American friends, they would be very similar. Whereas, some of my friends from more of the European background would kind of have the obviously more of the Eurocentric kind of individualistic way of way of being. So yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Krista.
I wanted to chime in. This term languishing, I've heard it before, but I've never thought of it in this particular context. And it's really helpful because one of the things I think that has been causing a lot of anxiety or negative emotions for most of us is the feeling of uncertainty that the pandemic has brought on. I mean, even when we began to navigate the different challenges of the pandemic, there was this sense that they were going to be short-lived, and now that we're done with, I don't know if we're in wave 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know where we are. I had to stop watching the news, to be honest, for my own mental health. But I do know that it is now apparent that there will be some facets of our lives that will never be the same and will never go back to the way they were. And so we're at a crossroads where part of the confusion and the conflicted emotions is how do we move forward, because we can't stay in this constant state of flux forever. It's like we almost have to make a decision to stop some of the negative emotions, or at least the more controllable ones. Whereas for a time it was okay to kind of stay home, stay glued to the TV in your sweatpants, eating chips or whatever you did to at some point you had to put real clothes on, you had to go back to the gym, you had to start meditating or exercising or whatever you needed to do to get a hold of yourself. And so this languishing to me reminds me of sort of like the residual effects of those decisions. It's like, okay, I'm doing some things that are positive and some things to cope with my, negative emotions, but at the same time, there's a low level of anxiety that is just a function of reality. Like, are we going to have this forever, or can we ever move past this languishing? So
Totally.
that's actually what I was thinking about as you were describing the languishing. That's what I guess insights I was getting from what you were sharing. So I don't know what to do with that yet, but it's interesting. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea that we are languishing, but will we stay languid? I mean, you can't predict this. I'm sure you don't have the answer to this, but feel free to tell us if you know how much longer are we going to be languishing.
And I think people are tired, and I think that people almost need time to kind of recover. And I so it kind of leads me to this aspect of, talking a little bit about, like, so obviously, our bodies are designed for stress, and uh, I mean, our bodies are amazing, but when this stress is prolonged, there's only so much that our bodies are going to be able to handle, right? And so when it's this uncertain amount of stress and uncertain amount of time, then, like, how are we going to be able to kind of cope with that? And so stress, obviously, and anxiety share some common characteristics. And so here I wanted us to kind of talk about what that looks like. Like, what does stress look like? And I want us to look at our bodies and our minds and everything holistically, right? Because this is different. Like, emotions, loss of confidence. I think these are some of the things that people kind of don't think about. This feeling of apathy is just like, oh, I just kind of don't care the way I used to. And I think people are kind of seeing some of that and maybe not being able to describe what that is. Our mind, maybe maybe there's some of that indecisiveness, maybe some of that muddled thinking or, impaired judgment that we didn't have before. And then behaviorally, maybe some of that restlessness and things like that. And that could be maybe, also the environment. A lot more things are being done at the home, a lot more, our homes are now maybe more of our workplaces, more of our, schools. We've been maybe doing a lot more schoolwork there. What are our living environments like? Maybe they're a lot more stressful. Maybe they're a lot more isolating. Things like that. So this is how stress can manifest. If we look at some of the anxiety, this may be stress is anxiety. So stress is in response to something that's happened, right? So we may recognize that we didn't submit that assignment that was due, and that's going to be very stressful, and we're going to be like, what do we need to do about that? Oh no, let's respond to that. And then maybe this is going to be more of a constant thing. So maybe there's more of a constant state of anxiety when there's a lot more of assignments that are due. There's a lot more pressure to do well in school. There's a lot more pressure from your families to do well. There's a lot, things like that. So anxiety, there may not be that one identifiable thing that you need to do. And so this is some of the stuff that you may kind of be experiencing. So stress and anxiety are going to look a little different. I kind of just wanted to speak a little bit from a more, international perspective about what anxiety and a little bit of depression looks like. So, being nervous or nervios, is frequently used by the Latinx community to express anxiety. So many communities don't have a word to describe depression. So, people from India or Korea or Nigeria. So I don't know if, our student who's from Nigeria, if you have, anything to contribute to this, but from kind of what I've seen, there's no real word to describe it. I do talk a little more about it, but many cultures focus on addressing the physical symptoms of depression, which could look like this fatigue or insomnia or things like that. There was a study that was done. So in order to kind of assess for this depression that happens when you have a baby in the UK, in the United Kingdom, they typically give you like a screening questionnaire, and they ask you, are you having, any sadness or things like that. And when they gave this screening to these Punjabi women in the hospital after having given birth, they couldn't believe why anybody would be sad after having given birth, right? Because of course, these Punjabi women were like, this is the most joyous, amazing event. Why would I be sad, right? And so it's obviously just these cultural differences that we need to be aware of, right? So when people in the UK were giving the screening, I think it's important for an explanation of why are we giving this screening? These things need to happen. So less than 2.5% of the population in Japan have a mental health or substance use diagnosis. But they have a suicide rate of almost 20,000 people per year. So there's something there that's not matching up. So there's only 2.5% of the population that are saying that they have any mental health or substance use issues, but yet there's almost 20,000 people that are dying by suicide. So And then feelings of anxiety or depression are sometimes even better explained by religious or spiritual beliefs. I kind of wanted to put out some of the concepts of distress that are known kind of around the world. So there's the I hope I don't say this wrong, but there's the attack de nervios, which is a syndrome amongst the Latinx community, and basically it's categorized by these symptoms of emotional upset, and so it's typically after an event occurs, and so it could be somebody could get verbally or physically aggressive, or there could be these seizure-like or fainting episodes. There could be uncontrollable screaming, and it could also be after many events occur. And so it could also be kind of known as like the attack of the nerves. That's kind of like what it's directly translated like in English. Then there's this other term that's called that syndrome, and it comes from this it's a term that's coined in South Asia, and obviously if anybody's on here that could kind of better describe it, but it refers to these symptoms, and the symptoms are really diverse, but they're like anxiety or fatigue, weakness, weight loss, impotence, or multiple somatic. And somatic are symptoms that are like within your body. So you could have like headaches or stomach issues or things like that, or depressive moods. Should check the time. And so it could be various issues. And so ultimately it's kind of related to often with men, and a lot of not being able to have children, and that's kind of typically where it's related to historically, but I don't know if it's that much of the case anymore. Then there is the Kyle cap, which directly translated as wind attacks, and it's the syndrome among Cambodians, which includes symptoms of panic attacks such as dizziness, palpitations, short breaths, cold extremities, and then anxiety. There's also Maun, which is directly translated as humanly caused illnesses, and this is an Haitian explanation. And this is an illness that is brought on by someone else. So it's believed that someone else sends the illness to that person. And it could be that psychosis was sent, or depression, or things like that. And then this aspect of nervios, which is a common or broad expression in the Latinx community. And it's just referred to as like a general state of vulnerability to a stressful event, or difficult life experience or situations. And then there's susto, which is, or susto, which is fright, directly translated as fright, explanation for distress or misfortune amongst the Latinx community in the US, and then amongst people in Mexico, Central America, and South America. And this is after an event that causes the soul to leave the body, and it results in unhappiness or sickness, and it interrupts functioning. And then one of the last ones is, I'm going to struggle with this one, but directly translated, it's interpersonal fear disorder in Japanese, and this is categorized by various symptoms, but it could be an inappropriate gaze or awkward expressions in the body movements and things like that. So there's many cultures in the world that where thinking too much is considered to be damaging. I mean, even like when I lived in Ireland, if I was worried about something, the first thing anybody would say is, don't worry, you'll be fine, you'll be grand. Like everything was, don't worry, you'll be fine, you'll be grand. Like, yeah. This Hufungisa is a Shona, which is an ethnic group from Zimbabwe. So this is an expression of psychological distress. It's used when one thinks too much over upsetting thoughts, and it's associated with symptoms like anxiety or excessive worry or panic attacks or depressive symptoms and irritability. And then in Nigeria, studying too much can cause brain fag, which specifically causes feelings of heat or crawling sensations in the head. So I think that it's really important for us to just mention this aspect of loss during COVID. And there's so many layers of loss. I wrote down the different types of loss, but, for us just to kind of think about not only the loss of someone, but, kind of just thinking about the loss of connection to people, or, the loss of the way we kind of lived our lives, and so I just kind of wanted to bring this slide in for us to just acknowledge that. And then I kind of just put in a slide about substance use. I wanted to just mention treatment, only because within the US, that's a lot of how where the focus is. But in many different countries, treatment is the focus is through traditional healers, and they serve many roles. What in the US is known as like educators or counselors or social workers or psychologists. So Muk Gabi is an educator. He's actually done like trainings in like, I think it's like 30 countries and like 6 different continents. He's incredible. He's a psychologist, and he goes around the world and does like interviews and trainings and things like that. He's amazing. And so he interviewed a medicine man in Botswana, which is a country pretty south in Africa. And he asked what could be done for those who have given up hope. So, for those countries that don't have a name for depression, given up hope is a term that maybe you can use, right, for some of those countries. And the medicine man said that they have them stay up all night, then sacrifice a chicken and eat it. And so I want us to kind of think about how, there's lots of different countries and how they look at that. And then language and socio-economic factors such as not having health insurance or one's immigration status can be barriers to people getting the help that they may want. Now I know we're getting close to time, but I kind of wanted to point this out. So, last year, Harris did this amazing article, and it was called Face COVID. And, this really speaks to what we can do. So this is a little bit about what, Dr. Crystal Harris was talking about, So this is an acronym, and I'm going to break it down, but here it's laid out. So the first thing is focus on what's in our control. So, here we know that, things are starting to return back. So let's focus on what is in your control. There may be things that you can do. So watching the news, or, that was something that got too much. So here's acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. This is kind of, going off, if we can name it, we can manage it. And, finding that new term of languishing, I thought that was helpful. And so I added it in here. But, feelings of uncertainty, powerlessness, isolation, anxiety, discomfort, fear, fatigue during this time, they're all valid, and I think that this is important for us. The loss of normalcy, connection, financial stability, I think these are all things that we're experiencing. Our world has drastically changed. Our worry is real. May not go back to the way it was 2 years ago, and for us to kind of recognize that and acknowledge that's okay. So this is an exercise that, it's kind of coming back, the C of the, face COVID is coming back into our bodies. So here is, we can all maybe we can take 30 seconds and do this. I think it would be important for us. So if you're all sitting down, find a little comfy spot. We can do this for ourselves. I want you all to take a deep breath. Straighten your back. Now I want you to recognize what your toes and your feet are doing. I want you to notice your legs. How does your stomach feel? Where are your hands? What is your head doing? Does your head feel heavy? Tired? Relax your shoulders. Stretch your arms. Stretch your neck. Push your feet hard on the floor. Okay. So I literally raced through like all 5 of those. These are literally, you can do either one of them or all of them. I put some resources at the end, but you can do all of them. And it literally just takes a few seconds. But I think it's really important that we do that for ourselves. Engage in what you're doing. It's very easy for us to be sitting here and, checking emails and doing so many things all at once. I get it. But for us to really try and eliminate as many distractions and separate our work days from our family time or friend time or whatever the case is. And then, video calls are exhausting. And I literally was saying to Amy before we got on here that, it's exhausting getting on another video call, or, some of your classes are still online, or I don't know, maybe if they are, but, a lot of it is because, people are looking at you and, it requires more focus. It's hard to keep focused when you could be doing other things, you could be doing the washing, you could be doing other things, but there is also, it's not as natural, right? Like if I was sitting in front of Amy, I could see that, Amy was about to talk back to me or whatever. But maybe if there was online, it could be that, if there was a slight pause, I was like, oh, is there a technology issue there, or things like that, right? But there was a study done that it was, if there's 1.2 seconds of a delay, then someone appears either less friendly or less focused, or it's that much of it is causing anxiety. So if there's things that can reduce the time, reduce the time that you spend online, do that. If you can send an email rather than hopping online, or if you can do a shared drive instead of a Zoom meeting, or if I'm meeting with students or whatever the case is, I'm saying to them, you don't have to worry about turning on your camera, save your energy, or whatever the case is. If you can do things like that, I would for sure try and do that. Take a few minutes if you're working in a group with your with your, like if you're doing a group project, take a few minutes at the start to check in with each other, see how each other are doing. I think that is so important, to be asked, how are you? And genuinely, like, how are you doing? I think like now more than ever, we need to be checking on each other. You could be the first person that's asked that other student that week, how are you doing? I think that that's so important. This committed action plan, this is just something that you can do for yourselves. How can I spend my time more? Ask yourself, how can I spend my time more efficiently? Can I ask somebody to help me? What are the simple ways that I can look after myself? Be realistic. And so the action plan for yourself is identify one support person. Identify 2 things that you might want to change, and then identify 3 things that are important for you to maintain your own mental wellness. So that's a little committed action plan that you can do to maintain your own wellness. And then the O in face COVID is be open to making room for all things, and thoughts and feelings. Be open to asking for what you need, and then be kind to yourself, because the last year and a half has been tough. Values. So during this time of crisis, it's not possible to achieve all your goals that you'd set out to do, but you can still live your values. To ask yourself, if you can manage these difficult thoughts and feelings, what would you start doing more or less of during this time? Here's just some resources for you, regarding COVID, and then regarding some emotional distress. These are 24/7-hour crisis hotlines, and then Governor State have the wellness center. So reach out, and that way you'll be able to get constant support. I think that that's so important. And then the D in face COVID is disinfect and physically distance yourselves, not socially. Socially is important. Other strategies: focus on eating healthfully. Practice mindfulness, not mindlessness. Find something to laugh at each day. Stay connected to positive people. Tell people in your life how much they mean to you. Find joy in music, art, and some form of creative expression. Focus on at least one thing you can be grateful for each day. Utilize mental health experts as we do for our physical health. Consider keeping a journal to capture daily thoughts and feelings. Abandon perfection. Oh, if I could say prioritize one thing, that's what you should do. Prioritize what is essential and what you can let go of. And then each day acknowledge the things you're doing well in life. Celebrate your strengths. So I put down some daily rituals at the end here. There's 5 of them I created. So if there's one that sticks to you and you think that it's a good daily ritual, print it out and stick it up somewhere, or print them all out and stick them all up somewhere, and maybe it'll be helpful for you. So this one is, clear. So connect with at least one person, laugh out loud, express gratitude, allow imperfection, recognize your strengths. The other one is COVID has created many new challenges. Try this daily ritual. Connect with at least one person, own your feelings, prioritize what's important, express gratitude. Be bold. Be in touch with at least one person, own your feelings, laugh out loud, don't sweat the small stuff. Remain strong. Start your day with positive intention. Take time for yourself. Recognize your strengths. Own your feelings. Narrow your priorities to the great things that are really important. And then give positive feedback to others. And then SMART daily rituals. Start your day with positive intention. Make an effort to reach out to one positive person, Allow imperfection in yourself and others. Recognize your strengths. Take time for yourself. Breathe. And then here's some resources. So like the 30-second body scan, I kind of did it in a funny way, but this is how you actually do a body scan. 4 ways to achieve a better work-life balance. This is the Calm app, which is amazing. They do a lot of mindfulness. This is the Face COVID. If you want to read a little bit more about what I kind of briefly went over. This is office ergonomics, working from home. So if you're doing more work from home, it may just help you set up your home work life better. Here's a playlist, which may be helpful. Here's difference between stress or anxiety that you can read up a little bit more about. Here's things to do at online that may be helpful if you're bored at home. Here's tips for social distancing, quarantine, isolation. May not be as relevant, but and then here's just some tips. But I will leave this up here in case anybody wanted to reach out. But yeah, unless there was another slide anybody wanted me to go back to. That's all I have, Amy. Sorry I rushed through the end to get on time.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, Claire. That was a really great presentation. Lots of useful information, and it's great just to hear all the different perspectives from around the world on, different ways to define how we feel, right? I was particularly interested the humanly caused illness you mentioned that the Haitians had defined reminds me a little bit of what many cultures use the eye for, the eye in the Middle East or India or even in Italy. They talk about the eye, this evil eye, and it kind of reminded me of that. So that's just kind of a little interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I worked as a flight attendant for like those 8 years I was living in Ireland, so I managed to get to meet so many more people from so many different places. So yeah.
I bet. Are there any questions from anyone on the session right now? Okay. Well, thank you, Tanya. She just wrote she really enjoyed all this information. I know Dr. Crystal Harris had messaged me also that she really enjoyed the program. She had to leave a little early to get ready for a meeting. But thank you again, Claire, and we look forward to sharing this information. Hopefully, it'll be helpful for a lot of people.
Good. Thank you all for taking the time to come today.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you so much, Claire.
Thanks. Be well.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.